Awesome. Good morning, everybody. This is Rolando Mia with Zyris, and we have a very special guest today. Um, During the course of our discussions with a lot of our artists, with a lot of our business professionals, finances, especially given what's happening in our crisis, especially given all the uncertainty that's happening, is a big topic. So our guest today is Wells Hughes. He's a partner at Arlington Financial, and he has 25 plus years of experience working as a financial consultant. In addition, his specialty is in working with dentists and physicians, and we're looking, basically he's going to provide us with some insights, some feedback, and then just general things to think about with regard to you know how to deal with finances. So Wells, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on and spending a little bit of time.
Thank you, bro. Good morning, everyone.
All right, so I'd like to first of all with clarifying something. I hear a lot of dentists that I speak with talk about, go talk to your accountant, or go talk, look at what is the difference between an accountant and a financial planner?
Well, in general, I think, and I've been asked that question many times over the years. Frankly, actually CPAs can do occasionally follow up on financial plans and do that for their clients. But in general, what their focus is a 12-month calendar. So they have their deadlines of year end and in October, their filing dates, and they typically look at their clients' taxes each year to, of course, reduce them as much as they can and give them good planning ideas around that. We are typically much longer term focused. So, I really look to people's life expectancies with some of the questions I get asked, and then the answers that come from that are based on, looking ahead in people's lives. Obviously, the future is unknowable, as most people can understand today. But CPAs look at very much the tax situation every year, whereas we're much more looking at wealth creation over people's life, making sure things like life insurance, estate planning get covered, obviously tax planning as well. We work very closely with CPAs to make sure we're not doing something on the investment side that's affecting their tax picture negatively. But in general, our world is much longer term. CPA's world is typically annually.
Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate that. When you look at what's happening during our crisis, the big issue, or the context that we hear a lot, is because of the uncertainty. Literally, practices right now, because of the mandates from the CDC, from the American Dental Association, all is that only emergency procedures, which is cutting back their production dramatically. So the fact that all of a sudden the practice is literally not working, there's impact to the staff, there's impact to just all of the financials around it. What advice would you give people regarding dentists specifically, or any business owner, regarding what to consider right now with regard to money?
Well, that obviously being a big question for probably a lot of different people listening out there, different age groups, and certainly different stages of preparation. Our clients over the years have been encouraged to always look at, and we did this especially last year when the market was so strong, is you really take a look at how you're connected to the financial system, number one, in terms of your credit lines and your debt levels that you currently have, and make sure you always have access to capital. Because in these times, all of a sudden, as I tell people, when sort of like life insurance, if you don't get that handled while you're insurable, you can't do that after a problem happens. So right now, where the credit markets are, I would say it would be very difficult to go out and refi loans, get credit lines, etc. So it's a little bit of, I wish we had talked about this last year, but from our standpoint, that's what we encourage our clients to do. And we're a net worth based planning firm. So when I look at my client's net worth, I can always see what the amount of debt they have versus the amount of assets they have. So we're always constantly monitoring that to make sure that that is both healthy for them financially, that also are there opportunities to increase our ability to access capital, but both in terms of their own personal needs, but also in terms of when the economy changes. So I would think that the majority of those people out there, if you are working on lines of credit or have debt out there, you need to work very closely with your banker, your hopefully local banker that you have. Hopefully those people are going to be working very closely with you to figure out a way around this. This is a very unprecedented moment, of course. In my career, we've had 4 different market price dislocations in my history. I started in 1987. So we had 1987's crash, then we had, brief though it was, then we had recession 1991, then we had dot-com blow up 2000 to 02, and then we had the 08-09 Great Recession. So the difference here, obviously, is this is biological, and the others were financial. Obviously, during the other ones, my dentist clients were still working. My physicians were still seeing patients. The lady who cuts my hair was still in business. The restaurants were open. So the way we're going to get through this is obviously in much of a teamwork approach. And I would encourage your clients and everyone listening to make sure you are being very proactive about working, again, closely with your banker to somehow get through this. But in the future, when you look at your net worth and you're doing your planning, when you hear your planner or advisor say, I think we need to go ahead and put the line of credit on our house right now, or we need to open a larger business line of credit than that we can achieve now because our practice has grown, that you really don't look at that as in an anti-debt lens, that you more look at it in terms of protection and safety, very much similar to insurance.
Thank you. So if I understood correctly, what's really important for the business owners is to take a big step back and look at their financial picture. And they should do this with a professional or somebody who looks at this on a regular basis. Correct? Is that
correct? Yeah. I mean, what we're always looking at is, are my clients in a healthy place financially? And that's fairly easy to figure out with assets and liability statement. So once you do that, then each year we update that to make sure they understand if they're overloaded in risk in one place, they have too much debt here, they don't have enough cash backing them up. That's a big one right now, obviously, with liquidity being impacted. So again, obviously, this is a worldwide pandemic, and I've always told my clients since the 80s, everybody was worried about Russia bombing us back in those days, and I took it upon myself quickly to figure out, okay, well, nothing I'm going to do is ever going to help us through that. So for years, I opened my meetings with new clients of, hey, I can't build a financial plan and an investment plan through nuclear war and global pandemic. And, here we are. Luckily, right. Last year, we spent a lot of time reducing risk for people with market levels being at where they were. We looked at their liquidity, made sure they were prepared. And several of them, of course, said, well, why are you so negative? The market's doing great. And I remind them that's exactly what they pay us to do, because these market dislocations happen and then liquidity goes away and we have to be in a good place to get through that.
So we've been hearing cash is king. What does that mean? Or how would you, what advice would you give people regarding cash? Because, they were paying for headcount, but a lot of people are furloughed, but now it's a matter of prepping for going forward. What is cash is king? What does that mean? Or how would you frame that?
Well, recently the credit markets have gone through a lot of close moments in terms of, and the same thing happened in 08-09 to a degree, but it was one sector of the economy rather than this is basically the entire fabric of the economy, privately held businesses. That's a really tough question, Rolando, because I think, again, it's not like you can go out and produce it now, right? So if we weren't prepared before, there's not that much we could do. I would say, again, people need to be very, very careful before they start doing things like pulling money out of retirement plans, liquidating assets to live on, going into debt maybe at higher levels than they should. All of those need to be thought out very carefully because those will impact everybody's financial future when we get back to hopefully an economy that actually is able to work and function. And obviously my clients can start seeing their patients again. I don't think this is forever. My doctor clients have been very quiet during all of this. I think they understand the epidemiology of what's going on with this virus. Nobody has panicked. Obviously, we've done working with some of them for 30 years. So they've been through several of these with me. It's my younger clients that seem to be their world is a little more rocked in terms of like the younger dentists and physicians. So I think that those folks do need to reach out to a planner, make sure they have a trusted advisor that they pay to help them through that. Because again, their expertise is obviously fixing teeth and doing heart surgeries, knee surgeries, and my attorney clients practicing law. Again, our job is to make sure we get our clients through this very healthy, in a healthy manner. And again, not damage their future for what is going to be hopefully a short-term present.
That's a great point, and I want to spend a little bit of time there. There's a feeling of anxiety because I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, I'm not working, so no cash, no money is coming in, so I need to get that. And you mentioned be very careful about going and liquidating assets or going into. You listed several things in that. When you say be careful, is that something that go into my 401k or go in? Liquidate some kind of investment I have to get me through. Is that just a knee-jerk reaction, emotional reaction, or what should people do around that?
Well, I think in some respects, some people may be stuck and there may not be any other options. The government is going to give them the ability to borrow now. In general, over my career, it's been about a $50,000 limit on what you could borrow from your retirement plan. And of course, in most cases, none of my clients have ever done that. Mostly it's staff that end up doing that for short-term needs. But in general, I would recommend, again, that's the last place I would look to remove money for. If you have the ability to borrow 100 grand right now, and you do that, and the market changes, and you're paying yourself I think the rate I heard that Congress was going to, and I don't know this exactly, but I thought it was like a 1% interest rate number.
Right.
You're paying yourself 1%, and any dollars that you have invested, if the market rises, it's going to go up much more than 1%. So we're going to lose money on that $100,000 that we borrowed out. And historically, that's been the way I've always described it to my clients, which is why they don't ever borrow money from the retirement plan. So, other sources of cash right now would be home equity lines of credit in very small bits, not to get too carried away. I don't think, again, selling assets right now, unless you're really stuck and you are upside down in terms of your net worth, that would obviously some people are going to be forced to sell assets in this time. But that's where our job is. That's what we've been doing for years for our clients, to make sure they're ready for these moments that we have no control over. And anyone selling assets right now into this market, you're really obviously, same thing with 08 or 9 and the other market dislocations, it was the wrong thing to do, because after we got through this challenge, obviously markets rose very rapidly, and those that had liquidated or were trying to avoid the pain of loss and they were in cash, they missed the rebound. So to get everybody through this, and the other thing to remember, guys, is that you were funding your retirement plans, I hope you were, before this event happened. Now with the decrease in revenue, you need to meet with your plan administrators to make sure that you haven't either overfunded the retirement plan earlier this year based on where income is going to be, or once the practice kicks back up, what your funding level will have changed based on your income change this year. And that affects most cash balance, defined benefit plans, et cetera. So take a look at those very closely with your plan administrator. The plan administrator is the accountant for your retirement plan. They file the 5500 with the government every year and make sure, obviously, that the plan is in mathematically correct and in good standing with the IRS.
That's great. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to ask you this question. In times of crisis, when things are completely, unsure and you're kind of, freaking out about everything, what are the top, 3 things not to do? Absolutely, you shouldn't be doing with regard to finances and what you're in your business right now. What advice would you give around those main things you should not do?
Well, first and foremost, I think you need to be very careful with your emotions. I think all of us, nobody is immune to that. And I think to have someone there that is more objective about your money and about your financial plan really helps people, I think, maintain an equilibrium in the midst of a global media craziness. I've been telling my clients for years that when we got to the next problem in the market or the world, these little boxes, which everybody thinks is the word of God to their ear, is going to increase the emotional response of people in global economic changes. And I think that has happened and will from now on, since we're going to be carrying those things forever. And so I would say take breaks from media. There's not much we can do there. You cannot trade your way through market dislocations like this. Most of the time, individuals that try to do that, they get hurt very much so. And then, in a 3, 5, 10-year time period out, they never can catch back up because they really are trading and investing based on emotion. So for those of you who have money to put to work, this has been an opportunity. We've done some rebalancing in our clients' portfolios, which is the exact opposite rebalancing we were doing before December, which last year, of course, since stocks had risen so much, we were selling some stocks and buying bonds. This year, it's absolutely, 4 months later, who knew? It's the exact opposite, obviously, with equity markets being lower. So I think that is number one, is not to act emotionally and have a plan and a discipline in place that gets you through this time period. The other thing is I would not, really think this is doom and gloom and that your practice is going to be gone and that the market is not going to recover. That's not the nature of this, our economy or the style of capitalism that we follow in this country. I don't know of course, I think most people overestimate the pace of change and they underestimate the scope. So the scope of this change over time is going to be very big, depending on which industry you're in. But I think healthcare professionals and most professionals in business will be fairly well insulated from this in terms of a long-term change. Obviously, if you make cruise ships or produce oil, that could be a challenge right now. But so I think those are the two main things: not to act emotionally and to have some objective advice to make sure you get through this time period. And I understand there'll be people with their net worth, they're upside down. Well, they'll have too much debt and not enough assets to service that. And I think that's where, coming back to the same point before, is I think bankers are going to be amenable to, and I certainly think landlords are the same right now, the ones that I speak to and work with. They're all working with their tenants to figure out a way around this. And most are being very equitable and fair in that situation. So if I'm a business owner where I own my business I own my business, but I rent from a landlord, I would also be talking to them about rent and deferring that. And most are very, very reasonable. They obviously are being affected by it as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I love the message around not becoming too emotional, because I guess when you're emotional at some level, you're irrational because you have a heightened sense of panic, and then you start doing crazy things. So
well, my grandmother once told me that 99% of the things that I was going to worry about in my life would not come true. And she's correct. So I think letting our thoughts, and I think it's a normal, I've been through many stresses with my life, with my wife's health. And so you can get into a pattern where, and I do have the experience with some people like that who have a perspective on life that is more about what other shoe dropping rather than what they're doing to get through this challenge and how they're gonna prosper during it. And I think those are the better emotions to have. Not everybody's plugged in that way, of course, but right. And I think those are the important things to remember. The emotions of this moment are very large and can hurt people financially if they act negatively during it.
Thank you. I also kind of resonate with the context that you said, which is somebody who is not emotionally attached to you can be very pragmatic and look at your situation. So they're able to provide you with some really good guidance, which is not mired in the stress of the situation and how am I gonna and what am I gonna do. So right. Thank you for that. That feedback is fantastic. What would you tell small business owners, dentists, physicians who are thinking about, hey, because things are going crazy, here's a phenomenal opportunity to invest right now. Or the people who are saying, hey, because it is crazy, I'm not going to invest in anything. What advice would you give with regard to how or what you should be thinking about with regard to maybe investing in new technology, or maybe this is a great time to, upgrade my practice or whatever? What advice would you give about that?
Well, I think going back to the first thing we talked about, which was liquidity, and this is, as you and I have discussed, Rolando, this is a little bit like coughing in the phone and asking your doctor what you have, right? Because I don't know these guys' balance sheets or how they're set up or what their market looks like or anything like that. So it's a little bit like flying blind. But I think number one, you start with the top of the balance sheet. You start with your cash position, and you make sure that that's as robust as it can be. Hopefully, if people planned ahead, they were holding anywhere between, 6 months and a year in cash reserves. Those folks should be fine getting through that, just depending on their liability side of the balance sheet. I do think most people need to do that first before thinking about investing, because investing, we're not going to be doing that on a 6-month basis, right? We put money into a diversified portfolio right now. I'm reminding people this is for 10 years out, at least. So my retirees have been well protected because, again, we reduced risk for them just based on the point of art of what we do. But I think for most people, if you are going to invest, the key is, again, to get that plan in place. And you most certainly should not be selling assets just because they're down right now. If you like what you own, the more challenged asset class over the next foreseeable future, 10, 20 years, is fixed income or bonds, because they're paying so little in income. The chance of them having a return that beats inflation in the future, in our estimation, is very, very low. So we're actually very happy to be selling an asset class right now, which is fixed income, which has a very uncertain future in terms of return, and buy well-run, publicly traded companies. So at cheaper prices, certainly, than we were 4 months ago.
Right.
But from our standpoint, this is an opportunity. No, you're never going to figure out where the bottom is, just like you're never going to figure out where the top is. So a measured, diversified portfolio with an objective planner to do that with you is the best way. And I'm assuming I have 70 clients around the country. Just me personally. My partners have many more, but I've had one panicked call from one client. So I feel like we've done our job really well in terms of preparing everyone. And this, again, is an unprecedented moment. So I hope my dentists haven't really reached out to me yet. I have them in pretty good order. My physicians are still working, most of them, in terms of their specialties. And then my other clients in other professions are pretty well set up right now to get through the short term. Obviously, this would be a different subject if we knew it was going to last 3 more years, right? And I think the statement is that the economy does need to get back on track. I think first things first, the biology of this virus first, and then the economy back on track. So the opportunities right now are current. Obviously, the market's risen a little bit, showed some strength. It does do that in times of great stress and dislocation. We have market rises during it. So I think there's probably going to be another, hand wringing and another risk off moment here. But I would tell people to be very measured. Make sure if your 60-40 portfolio has become a 50-50 or a 40-60 because stocks have fallen, I would highly recommend that you take the piece from bonds and move it right back up to that 60-40. So you make sure you're buying low and selling high right now in terms of fixed income. Same thing, reverse of what we did in December. So for most doctors and dentists, I think if they have help, those planning moments get discussed, the plan's in place, and there is no reason to change that, because, again, panic is not a strategy. So we encourage people very, very regularly. We have quarterly meetings with all our clients, and sometimes they're like, hey, why do we need to talk? We just talked last quarter. And this is the reason, just to make sure everybody's ready for these moments. And I think we've done a good job of that.
Thank you for that. So make sure you stay connected with people who understand your financial picture. Don't panic. I keep hearing, don't panic. Emotional decisions, knee-jerk reactions are I'm going to say risky or even dangerous, because they force you or get you to do things that you otherwise wouldn't. That sounds like it. And I'm also hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, when you're looking at investments, financial investments, but also investments for your practice or investments in your practice, the first thing you have to do is get a picture of what your current financial picture looks like. And that's best done with someone who's actually looking at it, as opposed to, I think I have, so that you do that. Did I get that right?
Correct. Yeah, we have a network statement for every one of our clients, and that's I call that my compass. So when you're sailing, like say you're going to sail from LA to Hawaii, obviously you don't go in a straight line when you're sailing, right? It's like this,
Right.
and you're not staring at your compass 24/7 at every second. You're looking at it about every 10 minutes, right? Just to make sure we're going correctly in the right direction. And the same thing goes with our planning. We want to look at the net worth statement annually. Obviously, everybody's financial picture will sort of change through their life. The majority of my clients have been through a lot of years with me. Their wealth has grown substantially. You have to believe in a positive future to invest today. So we believe, obviously, America is going to come out of this very strong. I think, yes, there's going to be changes in the economy. But in terms of our investments, we want to take advantage of companies that are being priced at a cheaper price these days than they were 4 months ago. Same company. Obviously, earnings will be affected by a lot of them. We expect them to grow out of that. So the way you become wealthier in this world is and this is why the rich always get richer, because they're not looking at their investments for their lifestyle. So they tend to hold them and add to them very unemotionally during most of their life. And I encourage my clients to have that exact same mindset. So everybody be careful out there in terms of making big changes, and certainly do not sell your assets into the teeth of this if you can avoid it at all.
And for the younger dentists, for the dentists who are starting out, who just got their practice, what's the key thing that you would have them focus on right now? The ones who are, I have massive amounts of debt, and I'm literally not working at all, and I've had to let my folks go on furlough. What's the advice you would give them to frame dealing with now, so that they can get into and take advantage of when this turns around?
Well, in that case, in that situation, I would think that person needs to do a serious deep dive immediately into debt restructuring, if at all possible. Obviously, to get that piece handled first, because it's blood in a stone, right? If they're not working and there's no income, they have no money to service that debt. So I think a younger professional needs to consider obviously managing through this. Let's say their cash position personally is okay. I would not be making any big changes to your practice right now. Obviously, I'm sure people have furloughed employees, and I certainly have friends that run businesses that have to do the same thing. But I think that's a tough question, Rolando, because you don't know exactly how that person is really plugged into the financial markets. And I do think that having access to capital right now would help that person get through. If they don't, then debt restructuring and being very careful with their money right now, their finances, is important. Anybody that has extra capital, either through some income source or through maybe they prepared for this and did a good job, they should be investing some of the little pieces of that into this market at these prices. Because especially if you're young and you can do that, and I know that's a little bit of a catch-22, how do you do it without income through practice? But let's say you get an inheritance or something, you need to be very careful with that capital. But I think, looking at a 40-year-old with markets prices where they are today, you cannot worry about what the markets are doing on the short term. That person needs to be aggressive, right, in terms of the future.
That is great advice, and thank you for that. So what I'm hearing, if I were to sum it up, I think the biggest piece is not to get emotional, to really take a settled, pragmatic view of where you are. Make sure that you're not making rash decisions because of being driven by the anxiety of what's not going on. Clearly, it's what you're saying is work with someone a professional and an advisor. By the way, what's the difference between a fee only, or you mentioned an advisory pay, and a broker? Are they similar?
No, broker, it works under a license called broker dealer, and like say someone that is at one of the big wirehouses at Morgan or Merrill, they're employees of those companies. They, in general, I think those guys have switched to a fee only model, but there are some out there that still charge commission on certain types of products. I'm not really sure how that would be with Schwab and these other companies charging zero commission. But so in our world, we're a registered investment advisor. It's a different license. We own our own business. We have our own team, our staff. We have our own retirement plan. Whereas at the big wirehouses, the employees, they hire other employees for you. You have to use their retirement plan and their benefits plan. You're pretty inflexible in the market in terms of how you run your business.
So the type that you are gives direct advice versus there's a kind of a little bit of a different perspective because they're trying to sell
those companies. So broker dealer also produces products to sell. They make things like structured products and banking products and things like that they sell downstream to their clients. We have nothing but our advice and our client service model and our own investment discipline to offer our clients.
Good to know. Well, Wells, thank you. I really appreciate it. What closing words or what closing advice, final advice, would you like to give listeners, and then also people who will be seeing this? This is going to live on for a while, and people see what closing advice would you want to give people as we close this down?
Well, I've been working at home now for a month and a half, so I had a lot of time to think about this. Obviously, this is an unprecedented moment. I think going back to our discussion around emotions, it is hard to do what we were discussing because of the backdrop of the virus craziness and then the media, obviously, storm that it creates. Because let's all remember, what does media do? They're selling your eyeballs from one commercial to another. And the way they do that is by build fear. So I would encourage everybody just to take a step back before making any big actions that would affect their future finances right now, either from a bull or a bear sense. In other words, going all in right now, or obviously selling to cash, assets to cash. That would be the wrong thing to do. And I would encourage them to look in their local communities or for someone like us that can help guide them through, because in these moments, not only is the virus and the media craziness, you also got your total emotional palette around their own practices, their own loss of income, their own families, health and finances. So it's a lot for people to do themselves, especially over their whole life.
Right.
Once people come to me at about age 65, it's much of what they're going to experience in their future they've already put in place. It's very difficult for us to take someone at that age and just make wealth for them in a short period of time. I think starting at an earlier age, that's where the younger guys have an advantage over the older guys if they get this planning process put in place early in their career and stick with it. And again, we've had clients for 25 years with us now. I've seen this process work, and for a lot of years, it's a little bit like watching paint dry because not much changes. I mean, they're getting wealthier, but it's real slow. It can be real slow. And sometimes people, even in those markets, they react or do something crazy with their money, again, either based on fear or greed. So I think getting a planner in place in your life early in your career is good. And certainly get advice before you make big changes to your practice, sell your practice, any of those big transactions, selling your office building or buying an office building later in your career, taking on a lot of debt. I think those are subjects that really can either positively affect people's lives or really hamper them from achieving their financial goals in the future.
Awesome. Thank you for that, and really appreciate that. That's really good to understand. Everybody, if people have questions or want to reach out to you, Wells, what would be the best way to get to you? What's is to contact you?
Probably through our phone or our website. It's Arlington Financial Advisors. And my personal email is wells.hughes, wells.hughes at arlingtonfa.com. That's ARLINGTONFA, frankapple.com. So wells.hughes at arlingtonfa.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've been working with you, and I appreciate it. And you have given incredible advice, and I appreciate that too. Anybody, if you like this content, or if you have additional questions, please feel free to send them in, and we'll do our best to get an answer back to you. If you also like this, please feel free to share this. Let everybody know. Dental Voice and Zyris, we're here try to get as much meaningful information so that we can get through this and take advantage of what happens, all the wonderful things afterwards. Thank you, Wells. Very much appreciate. I hope things are safe. Hope you're good, and I'm sure we'll be talking again.
I'm sure we will. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.